Alright, so I recently beat Bayle at rune level 1 on NG+7 with 0 Scadutree blessings. If you would like to watch that without commentary, the link to it will be in the description. Now, while plenty of people post impressive challenge run kills, few really explain what they're doing in depth or their thoughts on things. So I hope this can still be insightful even if you're not partaking in the restrictions I put myself under. The process in doing this kind of run is fun even if the execution isn't always. So before we get started, I might as well quickly go through my equipment loadout. My weapon of choice here is a cold broadsword for the occasional bit of freeze burst damage, but also because Square Off just fits this fight like a glove. Square Off in general is just ridiculously good value for how flexible and how good it is at building up posture breaks. And it does pretty good damage to boot, so that's a bonus. It's actually just good for a lot of fights due to its low commitment. And you can flexibly adjust around random combo extenders because you can roll cancel the stance you take before selecting an action. I don't think it would be wrong to say that Square Off alone really elevates straight swords. And the fact straight swords have low requirements means anyone could make use of it. And it's probably one of the most slept on ashes in the game. This is paired up with a cold misery cord to take full advantage of those critical windows. The misery cord itself has Raptor of the Mists, and this is basically just to hard counter a certain attack, which I'll get into when it comes up. The Twin Bird Kite Shield, much like the Red Feather Talisman, gives you an attack bonus whenever you're below a certain HP threshold. You can stack these effects together for a pretty hefty damage bonus. And then there's the Bloody Slash Dagger. That's only there to get me down to that threshold. There's no need for me to take it off because I'm not using the Blue Dancer Talisman. The Divine Beast Head is a new item that boosts your strength and dexterity by 4 points each. This provides a pretty substantial damage bonus if you can take advantage of the scaling. My talismans include the Blessed Blue Dew, which synergizes really well with Square Off's low FP cost and the fairly long length of time between my openings. I never have to take a quick sip during phase 2, which ensures I can always stay on the offensive. Likewise, the Two-Headed Turtle greatly boosts stamina regeneration and can allow me to take full advantage of certain windows, since I'll have to worry less about my stamina levels. Heavy square-offs can really chew through that gauge, and since the majority of my damage will be coming from square-offs, I get huge value out of the Shard of Alexander. My physic includes the Magic Shrouding and Intelligence Knot Crystal Tears. Both last for 3 minutes and will boost my damage output. This is taken when phase 2 commences, since phase 1 just doesn't matter in the long run. So without further ado, let's enter the boss room. I'll be commenting on most attacks as they come up, so I apologise if this feels long-winded at certain points. I've got a lot of footage from failed runs to help illustrate things. Now, for whatever reason, FromSoft have developed a fetish for making the boss immediately attempt to lynch you as soon as you enter the room in this expansion. This usually isn't too problematic when it comes to Bayle unless he chooses to use one specific attack, the forward fire breath. Now, if he does open up with this, you're probably just going to have to accept your fate. Sorry if you were having trouble with this. I could not find a reliable way to get out of this. And even when I did somehow manage to, the flames would exhibit erratic behaviour and I get hit anyway. I've seen it somehow hit me from behind more than enough times because it somehow reflects off the wall or something. Since it's right at the start of the fight, it's a bit hard to get too upset about it, but it gets a little exasperating when he does it 3 times in a row after you need to do your prep work every time. And for the record, I typically didn't have issues with the frontal breath while I was well inside the arena, but this particular instance always proved troublesome, and every time I thought I had it figured out, it would soon trip me up again anyway. This wouldn't even be a problem if there wasn't a possibility of Bayle using this as soon as you entered the arena. But yeah, you're just gonna have to suck it up. Sorry. Yeah, it's shit, I know. Hell, even outside of this instance, it's hard to pin down exactly what the aiming behaviour on this frontal breath even is. I think he aims it or attempts to lead it with some degree of tracking afterwards, but even after all my runs I can't be entirely sure. Sometimes he'll visibly move his head to the side, clearly leading the attack, and start sneezing, which is super obvious, but most of the time it's not. Now, what I did find was that if he initiated the frontal fire breath after a combo, I would just have to start booking it towards his right and jump at a specific moment to get out of harm's way. There are surely other ways, but that's what I stuck with since it was clearly working for me. Well, besides one time, when he suddenly decided to snipe in that direction on one of my best attempts. You know, despite never exhibiting that behaviour before on the 100 plus times I'd seen this combo already. This is somehow the least intuitive breath attack of all things I've seen in a video game. Oh right, yeah, this attack gets even more fun if you are fortunate enough to be close up. Because you can potentially cancel it with 2 different timings. So even if you think you can get a hit in, don't overextend yourself, because somehow this geriatric megaton drake missing half of its limbs can still swing its body around faster than it takes for me to recover from whacking it once with my metal twig. But I think I've spoken a bit too much about this particular attack for now. I can highlight the nuances of it later. In my clear, Bayle instead starts with a sweeping fire breath. Rolling through this is pretty forgiving, and surprisingly more so the closer you are. You may expect a breath attack to perhaps have more densely packed active frames closer to the mouth, but this isn't the case, and it's a fairly free follow-up in that scenario too. This is then followed up by a jumping lunge. You want to roll into this because otherwise you might find yourself too far from the head. However, like the head, the wing with the protruding bone that he lunges at you with also takes double damage, so you can hit that instead if it's more convenient. The way you want to fight Bayle is to only ever engage with his head whenever you can, because it takes full damage. This also helps alleviate a lot of camera issues you'd otherwise run into, but you'll probably find yourself either behind or to the sides of the head regardless sooner or later and be subject to some degree of fuckery. As much as I would love to suggest just not locking on to begin with, the head is a really wriggly target and can be easy to whiff otherwise. Next up is a rather intimidating combo. Bayle pulls back with a roar and will start lashing out with both wings. The key thing to understand here is that his left side will be struck twice in a rapid succession after the first hit, and if you roll backwards you'll probably get caught. So roll into both parts of the attack to begin with and everything should overshoot you. He'll then perform a lightning AoE. Since the camera is totally just worthless here, you're just going to have to get used to the timing based off the sound more than anything. In phase 1 you can try immediately following this up with a rolling R1. This is also a potential point where he may combo extend and oh boy does that get tedious, because he will usually just fly off towards the opposite side of the arena, completely out of reach. Thankfully he didn't combo extend here, so the rolling attack connects and I can immediately prep a heavy square off. Just don't send it while the head's too high, otherwise you'll probably whiff. And now we see the bite. The bite has a lot of possible random combo extensions. I got pretty lucky this kill though, and he didn't actually extend them a whole lot. If he only bites once like here, you can follow it up with a light square off. I really need to go through these possible combo extensions though before we move on. The same combos can also be initiated from an attack from the right wing instead, so keep that in mind. And I want to say that he'll usually be much more likely to extend if he starts with this attack too. He can follow up the bite with another bite, and at that point you'll probably just want to roll again, anticipating a third hit. That might potentially be a headbutt, or he'll commence a point-blank fire AoE that engulfs his lower body. The latter only seemed to come out if I was behind the head during this combo string. The headbutt may instead be followed up by a lightning slam from the right wing, which may also be followed up by him jumping off to do a frontal fire breath. Fun. Or he may just decide to frontal fire breath on the spot. I saw this a grand total of once. Surprise, idiot. If he does a headbutt, you can hold your stance to perform a light square off, but you may need to cancel it if he follows it up with a lightning slam. You can then usually perform a light square off after that lightning slam, provided he doesn't jump away. Touch wood. When it comes to the point blank fire AoE, well, there's some inconsistent behaviour. The fire particles will spread out in a random fashion, but they may or may not have a hitbox to begin with. For the longest time, I find myself being able to just run in there unabated after waiting a couple seconds. But after a string of deaths, I needed to examine what was going wrong. Look here. Here's a clip where I run through 2 fire particles before being hit by a third. Does the hitbox simply dissipate after it disperses a certain range? It's not entirely that, I think, because I've certainly been clipped while keeping my distance. Any way you slice it here, the feedback is it's bad. Of course, the smart thing to do here would be just to identify a safe route towards the head and avoid any fire particles completely. But this may also require you to play it way more safely than necessary and lose out on damage. I didn't actually see this attack a whole lot in my kill, which was unusual because I usually have to see it a lot. Whatever action you follow this up with is going to depend on how quickly you can reach the head. I would suggest paying attention to his right wing. If you manage to get back while it's still stuck in the ground, you can try a heavy square off. But if you're late, just do a running attack or a jumping attack. Now we have a frontal fire breath. Since this appears to have the properties of a conal AoE, you really need to be sticking right in front of him to be caught in this scenario. Now, you might think this is an ample opportunity to hit him, right? Yeah, wrong. In this scenario, he almost immediately cancels and goes into a 2-hit sweeping combo with his left wing. This attack itself is one of the easiest to punish, but it really goes to show why you need to be on high alert during this frontal breath. You need to assess if it's a short, mid, or long breath attack, which really limits the range of attacks you can safely commit to, at least immediately. I'm really not a fan of how this has been designed. Like I said, the 2-hit sweep with the left wing is an easy punish, but the window itself isn't particularly long. He is now telegraphing a charge. The charge has 2 variations depending on the length of the wind-up. If it's a short wind-up like here, he'll follow it up with a 360-degree tail swipe and will present his head on a silver platter afterwards, presenting an easy punish. If it's a long wind-up, he'll instead do a tail slam and you'll need to run in close yourself to have any chance of hitting the head. But if you're somehow too far, you may just have to give up on punishing it. There are also very rare instances where he can combo a charge into another charge, or he might combo into another charge without doing a tail action in between. And if the latter does happen, he may also choose to combo that with a frontal fire breath. The amount of times this actually happened to me, however, I could probably count on one hand, with half my fingers. So of course it caught me out when it did. A fairly quick posture break. Ideally, I want to proc my freeze just before I commence the critical strike so I can bank on as much bonus damage as possible. So while it did come in just a little late here, it's not the worst case scenario. For the record, NG+7 Bayle has about 59,000 HP, so chunking a good 11% of his HP like this is always good to see. After the critical strike, you can follow up with a heavy square off for an easy free hit. The freeze status is useful since it also lets you deal bonus damage while the enemy is afflicted. Though considering the amount of time-wasting nonsense Bayle might subject you to, the value is highly variable. Gosh, he's being awfully well behaved with these bites for once. Now here's an uncomboed lightning slam. This in itself has some possible RNG combo extenders that get particularly tiresome in phase 2. Regardless, you can roll towards his left and try to do a rolling attack. Sometimes I don't end up close enough to the head, but it's whatever. I'm doing so little damage outside of square offs anyway. If you squint, you can see I did 202 damage there. 59,000 HP by the way. He will then either follow this up with nothing, but you won't have enough time to hit him with anything substantial anyway, or he'll combo it with the 2-hit left wing sweep, which is the far more ideal result, because it's really easy to punish every single time. He's going for the jumping slam now. This looks nasty, but the timing on it is pretty forgiving, an easy square off punish too. Rolling into the direction you think the head is during the lightning slam here usually means you'll be in range for the rolling R1. That second posture break came in really quick. It's a pretty smooth phase 1 so far, but whatever I do here doesn't really matter at all. In fact, a bad phase 1 might be more beneficial if it means an early freeze and posture break in phase 2. And here we go, we finally see the potential RNG combo follow-up after that lightning slam. Bayle can just jump away. Now, I got pretty lucky here since he jumped towards a wall, but more often than not he'll be jumping so far away that you'll have no reliable means to counterattack, especially because you'll be wanting to give that frontal fire breath a wide berth. But again, even though I was dealt a good hand here, I need to assess what I can actually commit to here. Since he didn't cancel at all, I can fit in 2 light square-offs. And now we push into phase 2. Just get some distance and take a sip and pop whatever buffs you need. Bayle will take to the sky and start spamming fireballs. These aren't hard to avoid, but what you need to be more mindful of is your position relative to any walls. It's very easy to get into a bad position during this attack, and it makes evading the incoming dive bomb impossible if you're too close to a wall. This guy's arena is honestly just a bit too small for him. The lock-on can also just randomly break on you during this attack, which is always reassuring to watch. There's also a very, very small chance that one of the random lightning bolts peppering the arena might decide to connect with you too. No, I'm not shitting you, this happened to me twice. And you will never be prepared for it because you'll be too busy looking at the sky trying to avoid fireballs and keeping an eye on Bayle. The most ideal situation for this dive bomb is to find yourself close enough to a wall that Bayle's head is in reach afterwards, but not so much that his thick hitbox will grind you into the dirt as soon as he spins around. I see that I'm too far away and abandon any delusions of chasing an attack window. Remember that jumping lunge with the right wing? Well, it has a lightning AoE follow-up now. Since I don't want to hang around in one spot revving up a square off, I just jumping attack this now. Many of Bayle's attacks are going to have those lingering lightning AoEs now. Thankfully they're not too obnoxious and generally don't change how I tackle anything. Now, this attack has a really long wind-up and is thankfully really easy to punish too. I'd be laughing if I was playing a caster right now. A bunch of AoEs are going to erupt from the floor that you'll want to keep clear of. It's possible to roll through these, but doing this is easier. And then we can just waltz in and smack him. Easy. This lightning thrust combos in the same way as a bite can, so just keep that in mind. And remember that lightning slam from phase 1? Well, it'll typically combo into itself now. You can usually get a rolling R1 off after both. Just make sure you're on the left side of his head, since the right side will have those lingering lightning AoEs. Sometimes the combo will end here. However, he can either rarely combo this into a 2-hit swipe from the left wing, a charge into a tailspin, or will more frequently combo this into jumping off to perform a forward breath, just like he did now. Once again, I'm really lucky that he keeps jumping into walls. I just called this guy's arena way too small, but man is it working in my favour right now. But hey, hold your horses. What did I say about this fucking attack? Yeah, that's right, don't overcommit, idiot. I managed to pull off that first square off since I was already under him, but he immediately cancelled into a left wing 2-hit combo while I was prepping a stance for a second. I'm not going to get too mad about seeing this attack though, because it's free. It's just, you know, you really need to fight the urge to attack him there. Now, this one looks pretty intimidating, at first at least. Bayle starts radiating lightning and then slams down with his right wing really hard. You do not want to be close to the body when this comes down because the initial impact has a sizable hitbox. The ground will then appear to be erupting. And then after a very brief pause, the screen will flash and this is what you can roll through. Though apparently you can just jump through it too. I'm being serious here, I had absolutely no idea. I was looking through some other videos on YouTube just to corroborate my own findings and look at this shit. What? What do you mean you can jump through this but not the eruptions from just earlier? Are you having a laugh? Well, regardless, despite how flashy and dangerous this looks, it's actually piss easy to punish. Actually, this guy seems smarter than me. What does he think of the fire breath at the start?
The straight fire, however, is much more difficult and honestly, in my opinion, kind of broken, unless I'm misunderstanding something.
Yeah, see, he thinks it's shit too. Wait, hold on. Is this really the first roar of the kill? I'm surprised he whipped this out so late. He typically starts shouting at you when he hits about 80% HP. So only seeing it the first time this late is a real anomaly. The wind up on this is super short and it will probably spook you for a while until you get the timing down. The lightning bolts can simply be walked away from and I'd suggest walking towards his left side, because the last thing you want is to walk towards the right side and then have difficulty distinguishing between a frontal fire breath being led in that direction or a sweeping fire breath which always starts from his right side. You also want to make sure you move far enough so that the bolts aren't obscuring the entirety of Bayle's body, because he'll likely commence his next action before they let up. Oh, this is a great posture break because the freeze is still up too. So I'm going to get to bank on a lot of extra bonus damage. And it wore off as soon as I was done too, so the timing really was perfect. Ideally, I'm hoping for 2 freeze procs in phase 2, but sometimes he makes the build-up harder or easier. Oh boy, the flying breath attack. This attack has 3 components to it. There's a wave of fire, followed by a beam, and then a trail of explosions. And this trail of explosions is what Raptor of the Mists is for. For whatever reason, I started having difficulty evading these explosions after the beam reliably. Now you can maybe just chalk this down to a skill issue, but I think there's some slight timing variance based on the distance from where the beam started from, and the tight roll timing really exacerbates it. It's really easy just to dodge even just slightly too early or just too late. So I just took any chances out of the equation. I lose an opportunity to smack him after he lands, but that's a lot better than dying. And it sure makes things a lot less tense when I essentially have a get out of jail free card for this particular attack. Raptor of the Mists is a bit underrated, but it's really good for tricky attacks that don't have an immediate follow-up. Or you can use it to take advantage of really big AoEs by just sitting inside them and maintaining an offensive. The activation window is pretty lenient too, just make sure you're facing the right direction. Seeing the frontal breath close up like this is always a little spooky, but just try to get out of the way. Since I'm sure it's a conal AoE, it'll have trouble hitting you if you're perpendicular this close up. It's a short breath but not a cancel, so it's safe to square off. You can tell if he starts slowly easing off while his mouth is still aflame. Even though you can only get rolling R1s off here, they're still useful for building up status effects. Yep, and here we go, jumping off to do a frontal fire breath. This is the combo that can make Bayle incredibly tedious, since there's no way to really counterattack this. And I'd rather just play it safe and stay as wide as possible, because I do not trust that breath at all. I'd rather minimize any chances of being robbed again. The jumping slam gets an upgrade in phase 2, in which there's a delayed AoE afterwards. I managed to simplify the timing on this for myself, because it was possible to do a rolling R1 immediately after the slam itself, and then roll just shortly afterwards to avoid the AoE, which also opens up a spot to square off. God, he's being really well behaved with these bites. He's not usually this cooperative. Here I ran into some weird collision fuckery, and I get pushed back way further than intended. And of course this throws off my second rolling R1 too. It's a minor thing because it won't get you killed, but it will hurt your ability to follow up. It's not great. Oh right, he can take off to do the phase transition attack whenever he likes. This dive bomb is actually a really good opportunity to reapply any buffs or take a sippy. See how it looked like he was aiming towards his left there before adjusting last second? Wait, what? Was that really the first grab of this attempt? That's pretty shocking. Evading this is pretty forgiving, and I typically follow this up with a light square off. If he's being kind to me, he'll follow it up with the left wing swipes, which I can follow up with a heavy square off. This is probably the best string of actions he can perform for me, since it gives me 2 quick and easy square offs. Otherwise he might not do the wing swipes and instead choose to do something else. Actually, I forgot to mention something about these swipes. You want to try and dodge that first swing backwards, because I've found he cancels the combo if you get underneath him, and then you'll lose the window to attack him. Man, I should have packed throwing knives for this or something. Well, I guess a little reprieve doesn't hurt. Man, I really scored like really good RNG with the bites. And it's funny how you learn to be more intimidated by the fire breath than this. And here we see the very first point blank fire AoE of this run. In hindsight, I really do feel like I was dealt a really good hand this attempt. And I'm gonna play this fire AoE super safe since I'm feeling pretty good with how things are going so far, and it would be a really stupid way to throw it if I got greedy. So I only run in once it's completely cleared out and do a kinda wimpy running R1. And being cautious did pay off in the end. Yep, again, just jumping off to do the frontal fire breath. At this point I'm getting flashbacks to my prior best run, where he just sniped me out of the blue, and I'm really hoping he doesn't decide to randomly fuck me here. Also, if you're too far away on the fire breath, it's usually GG anyway. If it doesn't get adjusted at some point down the line, I'm gonna have some questions. Sometimes I just give up on the rolling R1 here if I already know that I'm nowhere close to the head. It's really easy to whiff it regardless, but it's whatever, it's chip damage. I've got a rune level 1 video for Placiduous Axe that's a really good showcase for Raptor of the Mists. I think on that boss especially, it really shines through. I initially wanted to try heavy Starfists on Bayle too, but I was whiffing those heavy R2s just way too much. You need something with decent reach or a bit of momentum to reliably hit his head, I think. And at this point I'm thinking, surely I'm due a crit strike and a freeze at some point soon. And I get exactly what I wanted. Exactly when I wanted it. Seeing a big chunk of HP cleaned off like this at the final stretch is really reassuring. But it's not over yet. Like, whatever I do here, I cannot afford to be greedy. Though of course I'm still going to be holding my breath every time I have to see that frontal fire breath. Thankfully I'm in the clear. And then he does a long telegraph with his charge, so I know I need to rush up to hit the head now. And just one more hit left. And thank God it's something easy, the grab. Oh, why'd I even do this? Don't ask. And now we can get to my thoughts on the encounter design here. This'll be the last time I'll be bitching about Elden Ring. I promise. I'm usually someone who keeps any negativity to themselves, but even I need to express myself sometimes. Honestly, this run was pretty clean and exhibited a rather cooperative Bayle that wasn't going out of his way to be a nuisance at every possible opportunity. Which is exactly why I needed to show all the possible ways this fight can and will not go in your favour. I probably sounded pretty enthusiastic about the whole thing in this delivery, but I need to make myself absolutely clear. After the hours I spent grinding this out, I ended up developing some strong feelings and really not liking this fight in the end. I still think this boss is really cool conceptually, and the inclusion of Egon really elevates it, and doing it with him probably is more or less the intended way to fight him. But the feeling I get with some of these encounters when you're pushing them to the extreme like this is that I can't shake the feeling that maybe I'm just farming a good run. Hell, as I abundantly demonstrated, even just starting Bayle basically required it to not begin the fight with a specific attack. I'm not living that one down, by the way, and the fact that it even passed testing feels kind of telling in itself. Every action, regardless of difficulty, represents some degree of risk, and the longer the fight drags out outside of my control, the more risk I'll be exposed to, which increases the chance of failure. This in itself is not a critique of the encounter design here, but rather an observation that exists even outside of games. It is a common truth. And the cliched thing to do while talking about the boss fights in Souls titles is to compare them to some sort of dance. So imagine if your routine had to be considerably extended by no fault of your own, but you still get penalised as harshly for any mistakes, with no greater reward for executing the routine to the best of your ability. In fact, you may even be rewarded less, because as I've demonstrated, Bayle can combo extend and be completely out of reach without an ample opportunity to counterattack. Frankly, it's unfair, unrewarding, and rather tedious if you start getting unlucky. Nothing says skill-based combat like the feeling of playing a slot machine. If it's not something actually unfair or an inconsistency that blindsides you, it's the boss being arbitrarily harder by an order of magnitude, because the funny number generator decided you're not allowed to adequately hit it this time, or maybe even the next time. And part of the solution is really simple. Such extenders would be more balanced if they just left the boss wide open for a while afterwards. It would actually feel good to weather the storm. If you knew you were going to be given an adequate window to get a big, meaty hit off at the end. They made all these flashy Ashes of War and spells, but so many of them feel useless outside of smacking mostly harmless trash mobs. Now, is it fair to judge a boss under such extreme limitations? Personally, I think it represents how strongly the fundamentals hold up. It's not like I'm doing anything here to make the boss inherently more obtuse, but rather I'm attempting to give it my full respect. I have to learn every possible variation and mix-up of the boss's attacks, and figure out a reliable answer to it. It should be a fun problem to navigate and find solutions to. And it's not like the concept of a no-hit run is unique to Souls games or Elden Ring. And usually it's a showcase of a certain mastery of the game's mechanics, and a deep understanding of the encounter design. So while I don't think it's unreasonable to say or even claim that the game shouldn't be balanced around such extremes, to me it just shows that the fundamentals of the encounter design here appear to be a bit sloppy in places. And it's evident when things are simply up to chance or seem to be operating inconsistently or without a clear logic. A game is fundamentally a system of rules. And while it can be fun and genuinely interesting when an encounter breaks those rules, it's best when it's more thoughtful and handled with restraint. I wouldn't like to think From are actually balancing bosses around the knowledge that there are ways to grossly minimize the resistance they pose, in order to justify some areas being overtuned, but it's becoming harder to ignore. Though the idea that these bosses are being balanced around summons has always sounded like a bit of a cope to me, to justify bad game design, because there's another longer running series out there that you may have heard of that has an even stronger multiplayer focus and also has NPC companions. Yet fighting the bosses completely solo usually ends up being even more fun and leaves you feeling more rewarded to boot. How strange. This design problem was already figured out 20 years ago, and they've only been iterating on it since. I would never call Elden Ring a bad game, but it certainly does a lot of things I don't find agreeable. Its design philosophies were interesting to explore, but they've also worn me a bit thin. So yeah, don't expect any more Elden Ring videos again outside of me streaming a randomizer again or something. And I hope you can understand that these criticisms aren't born from a place of disdain, or an unwillingness to adapt. I don't think I'd be able to muster so much to say, or be bothered to make a video about it, if it weren't for my history with these games, and at least some genuine passion and introspection behind what I was saying. I'm a pretty laid-back, amicable guy, I could assure you. But that's enough prattling on from me though. Maybe you'd care to watch a video where I instead uplift something I do really like. Because I'd much rather be doing that than engaging in this exhausting exercise. I've also taken a liking to streaming old games, and it's usually a lot of fun talking about them in the moment. So come tune in if you're inclined to. Bye. Special thanks to channel members Electrofunk, Aristhel, Bavi, Fenno the Fox, Dragonlord1472, PL, Hayden Richardson, Kitakami Ray, and Hakure Illusion. Your support is truly appreciated.